Oh, hello. You may have heard that sweet, delicious, nutritious bananas are radioactive, and it's true. Each banana has about zero point 0.1 microsieverts worth of radiation inside of it, and that is because bananas are rich in potassium, and a version of that potassium, potassium 40, is radioactive. So each sweet nan that you eat will increase your radioactive dose for the year. But should you really be afraid of radioactive nan? Well, if the limit for 1 year's worth of exposure to radiation before you significantly increase your risk for cancer is 100 millisieverts, how many nan would you have to eat in 1 year? Well, if you do the math, assuming that each nan is maybe 150 grams, then you would only have to eat 410 kilograms of nan per day, which is 900 pounds of banana per day for a year, which would kill you and is impossible. So even though bananas are radioactive, I wouldn't worry about them too much. I may have a false premise here that you are worried that you will be irradiated by bananas, but hey, that's what a live show is for. Speaking of which, hello and welcome to another edition of Because Science Live, the live edition of Because Science, where I take your comments, questions, and corrections and answer them off the top of my head in a vain attempt to show that I can think of things without reading them. So I have occasional voice of the void. Nate here. Nate will be taking your questions if you ask nicely. Nate, what we got?
From Christian Sebastiano Bado.
Ooh.
Kyle, what's your take on Batman's training? How would you think it would work on a regular person?
So Batman in, what's the first one? Batman Begins. He goes through a lot of ninja training, and there are limits to the human body, right? You see this in The Dark Knight Rises, where I think it says, oh, all the cartilage in your knees are gone. There's a limit to human reaction time, which is, about a quarter of a second, about 250 milliseconds. Now, if you train this down and you train your reflexes down, you can get much, much quicker. You could probably cut that in half, but there is a limit to how fast you can be, how reflexive you can be, and how strong that you can be. So, if you went through the same training that Batman did for how long he did with the same expertise that he did, I'm sure you could improve greatly in your fighting capabilities. Of course, I mean, this kind of gets into the expertise question that people like Malcolm Gladwell get at, which, I don't agree with everything that he says, but he's the one who really popularized the 10,000 hour rule for you to become an expert in something. Now, there's a lot of controversy around that number, but it's to say that innate talent may not matter as much as deliberate practice. Practicing deliberately so that you are intending to get better each time that you do it. And expert training really, really makes a difference. Someone like Tiger Woods, why was he so prolific and so dominating at golf? Well, he had a professional trainer since the age of 3. Now, no matter what talent you have, if you were trained by a professional golfer since you were only 3, I bet you would get pretty dang good too. So all of that is to say that if you had the best trainers and you trained deliberately for a long amount of time, you would probably see major gains and take you from playboy billionaire philanthropist to, instead of using my money and putting it into like after-school programs and crime prevention, I'm going to put a cape on and punch you. So, Batman training. Sure, why not? Does have its limits though. What's next?
From Austin Shaw. Hey Kyle, could you see using gamma radiation?
Could you see using gamma radiation? So this kind of gets at the last episode of Because Science, which was X-ray vision. And any kind of different radiation vision is going to have the same problem in that, higher energies like X-rays and gamma rays are very penetrating. Gamma rays specifically are very, very penetrating because they are so small that they can travel literally in between atoms and molecules. The wavelength of gamma radiation is just a trillionth of a meter. They're smaller than the diameter of atoms and molecules. So it can be very, very penetrating. Now, the problem with that is that if you sent gamma radiation out of your eyes, it would pass through a lot of stuff, and then you would have to travel at the speed of light around to see what it interacted with. It's not necessarily going to easily reflect off of a surface like visible light could and then make it back to your eyes. The same, and you would have to be immune to the ionizing effects of gamma radiation itself. If you were shooting it out of your eyes, you would irradiate your brain and the rest of your head, and it would be like eating so many nans at once. You don't want that kind of nan exposure from your face. What's much more viable, if you want to have different radiation kind of vision, is going the other way on the electromagnetic spectrum, infrared and radio and microwave. We use that now to great effect. We do not do quite the same thing with gamma rays. But, like anything, it gets complicated, because if you were going to see in infrared or radio, the size of your eyes, or at least the structure of your eyes, would have to change, because the wavelength of radio waves can be longer than that, much longer than that, over from meters to kilometers long. So to get a sensible signal from something like this, your eye would have to do something really special, or it would have to be giant, and you would look like an anime. And that would be, you would look so silly. So, can you see with gamma rays? I think it's one of the least plausible of all of the spectrums of sight. What's next?
From Killian Holm, why do some people have different color eyes? For example, my right eye is blue and my left eye is brown.
I'm not a biologist. Is that heterochromia? I think it's called heterochromia, or I'm describing where your eye is split down the middle. But if you have two different color eyes, this is a quirk in your genetic code. And blue eyes, did you mention blue eyes? Whatever. Blue eyes, white dragon, didn't, blue eyes have evolved over time. It was a genetic quirk that did not get, a mutation rather, that didn't get spread around until relatively recently in our human history. So you have one of those mutations. You have a little quirk. And if over time a large population of you were found to be just so much more attractive with that kind of eye thing going on, that you spread that mutation, then in the future, more humans, or a majority of humans, might have two different colored eyes. That's just how evolution works. There's a fascinating example that I just looked up that's kind of like this, not the same thing, but how different colorations of animals can be propagated throughout a population. So again, not quite the same thing, but this was the different colorations of squirrel fur. And researchers were looking into this. What is more likely to trigger an attack response from their predators? A hawk, a sun-tailed hawk, I believe. A very light color fur on a squirrel, or a very dark color fur on a squirrel, or something that was more in the middle. And what they found was the squirrels with the fur coloration in the middle more closely matched the color of the forest after a wildfire. And so after a wildfire, those squirrels were less likely to get preyed upon by those predators, which shows an evolutionary pressure selecting something that is very, very specific, like the frequency of wildfires, to see what gets sent through future populations, what is selected for. And I thought that was really cool, because you don't think of nature responding to disaster like that, but life, Jeff Goldblum. So to answer your question, I don't know. I think it's heterochromia, but y'all could put it in the chat. It's either the two different colors or the split. Either way, it's cool. You probably look awesome. What's next?
From Michael Roman. Random question inspired by being sick this week.
Okay.
Why do we sound so weird with a stuffy nose? Our vocal cords shouldn't be affected, right?
No, your vocal cords shouldn't be affected, but what you're closing, there's your nasal cavity is connected to the rest of your throat, right? That's why, if you plug your nose and you plug your nose, you can't breathe down into your lungs, right? So it shares a volume. So think about sound waves going through that volume, right? I'm producing pressure waves from up through my body and then out through my mouth. Now, some of those waves, I'm just speculating here, but some of those waves, some of that vibration is going to have to go through or around or reverberate in your nasal cavity. And if you were to suddenly close that chamber with, let's say, phlegm snot, that would change the size of the chamber, relatively speaking, and how the vibrations move through it, which would change the sound of your voice. Again, I am speculating, but think about it like a flute. If you have a flute that is all connected, say the mouthpiece of the flute is the lungs and the end of it is your mouth. If you start closing buttons that are all connected to the same tubes, it changes the sound that comes out of it. That would be my guess to why you sound different. Because if you're plugging up a hole in your body flute, nope. Yeah. What I said previously, I'm not going to continue on down to that path because I know where that leads. It leads there. What's next?
From Mike Schlager. Is it possible to build an elevator to space?
So space elevators have been around as an idea. Oh, look at this. I have a little surface already. Space elevators have been around as an idea for a long, long time. It would be a really cool way to get stuff up into space for relatively cheap, that wasn't that dangerous, etc., etc. And it's a if this was the Earth that wasn't perfectly circular. It's not. Not that much, that'd be crazy. Anyway, imagine this is the Earth, that would be the space elevator. Now, what is the problem? The Earth is spinning very, very fast. 1,000 miles per hour, I think, at the equator, or kilometers per hour. It's very, very fast at the equator. So the Earth is spinning very, very fast. So imagine that you're holding this space elevator and you're spinning it on the end of a string like you would a ball. There's a lot of force. It has to provide a lot of tension. This way to match the force that you're putting on it as the Earth is spinning. All of that is to say is that I do not believe we have found either the material or the process of making enough material, like carbon nanotubes, we haven't mass produced them yet. We haven't found the required strength and production to make a structure strong enough to withstand these rotational forces. It's an interesting concept, but we're not at the scale of our technology where we can make something that can withstand these incredible forces. It's like, it's not quite the same thing, but imagine holding on to the very edge of a merry-go-round and then having the merry-go-round spin at 1,000 miles an hour. It would be very, very hard for you to hold on. That's the same problem here. So we would need to come up with a very ingenious engineering way of making a space elevator, which I do not think we are at practically yet. Maybe theoretically, but not practically. What's next?
From Meow Indeed.
That's right.
In Cyberpunk 2020 and 2077, extreme body modifications are commonplace. How do people stop their body's immune systems from rejecting those add-ons?
Right. So in games like Deus Ex, Cyberpunk 2077, AUGs are people extremely and radically altering their bodies with implants and cybernetics and stuff like that. How can you get your body to not attack and reject those implants? Well, in Deus Ex, they come up with a chemical called neuropazine, which basically suppresses the immune system so it doesn't attack your implants as much. Of course, there are huge problems with suppressing your immune system. It's what keeps you safe. It's why, if you've ever heard any pharmaceutical advertising, especially, well, I think that only happens here in the US, but if you ever hear pharmaceutical advertising on television, when they're advertising for something that suppresses your immune system, they always check, like, don't take this medication if you're already sick or if you're prone to infections, because your immune system will not be able to fight as hard to reject those infections and whatever else you have. All that being said, how would you then make your immune system not completely compromised, but also not totally rejecting an implant? I don't know. If you figured that out, it would probably be Nobel Prize worthy. But we do have implants right now that the body doesn't completely reject. It's not like what you see in these games and in Cyberpunk, but like titanium implants for someone's knee or for someone's hip. The body does not identify that so much as a threat and then reject that threat. In fact, bone can grow around titanium implants, so the body isn't rejecting those. So the way forward in bioengineering is finding that material or that structure or those chemicals that can change the targeting parameters for the immune system without having to destroy the immune system or its ability to fight off infection or something like that. And I'm not a biomedical researcher. I'm sure there's a lot of fascinating papers that are happening right now that are looking into this kind of stuff. So if you're interested, I'd start looking it up. I'm definitely not an expert, but I imagine there's a lot of interesting ideas floating around right now, because I'm fascinated with the idea of transhumanism. If we could come up with a hand or an arm that was as fully functional as your arm, and there was no downside for you to remove your own arm, would you do it electively? And I don't know what my answer would be. And I love that confusion. I love blurring the lines between what is human, what is machine, and what makes you, you. It's so fascinating to me. So I hope to live long enough to see a Deus Ex level augmentation kind of future. Not all the, like segregation and stereotyping, but like metal arms. What's next?
From BRB in the Crapper. What would happen if the whole internet went down completely worldwide without warning?
If the entire internet went down worldwide without warning, this sounds like an idea big enough to be an entire book. So I'm only going to give you my first impression, which would be that it would be one of the more catastrophic things that could happen to humans and human society. Think of how many things are connected to the web or need the internet to function in some way. We're not just talking about cell phones and towers. You're talking about infrastructure that is critically important to our survival, water treatment plants, power plants, the electric grid that are connected in some way to the internet. And if everything went down, communications arrays, GPS, everything that relies on GPS. Wow, it would be a global catastrophe. It would have to be, I imagine. Or people would just complain that their timelines weren't loading for a little while and that it'd be cool. But I'm assuming it's going to be on the more catastrophic side. I don't think we really consider just how much of our life is interconnected and how easily it would be to topple a lot of modern convenience. We're always just a few, just a few flickers of electricity away in most power grids throughout the world before the power grid just goes off. They usually don't publicize that, but you're always on the razor's edge of not having enough or having too much, and then everything would go down. It'd be bad. I'm glad you're thinking about it. Someone has to. What's next?
From Cynix.
Why is my Earth purple? Sorry, go ahead.
Kyle, in Expanse, they use propulsion for gravity. Excuse me. Yes. If you accelerate gradually, can you safely reach otherwise dangerous for human speeds?
Yes, absolutely. In The Expanse, which is my current favorite sci-fi show, which I am moderating the science panel at DragonCon tomorrow afternoon. If you are there at 2:30 p.m., I will be doing the science of The Expanse from A to 0G. So I'll be there if you're in Atlanta. I found a way out. There's a weird portal. So in The Expanse, they use thrust to induce artificial gravity, which is to say that if you have thrust happening behind, let's say, the floor of a spaceship, you will be experiencing a force that is if you accelerate, correctly at 9.81 meters per second, you create basically your own weight like it would be on Earth. You create 1g, and that is a very viable way of creating artificial gravity. So can you get up to ludicrous speeds while being safe? Yes, the human body it's very sensitive to acceleration, but it's not terrible. So, if you are accelerating somewhere between, 1 to 3 G's constantly, probably around 1.5 to 2. If you're accelerating at that constantly, you are going to feel heavier. You're going to feel some stress on your body, but it's not going to kill you, probably. So even at 1.5 G's, if you're accelerating at that for a longer space mission, weeks or months, by the time you reached wherever you're trying to go, you would be going really, really, really fast. In space, what is important until you get up into like relativistic velocities where just space itself can provide drag on you. When you're not in relativistic velocities close to the speed of light, what's the limiting factor is how quickly you can change your velocity, the acceleration. Velocity itself is not what's going to kill you. It will be the acceleration, how quickly you speed up or how quickly you slow down. That's why, that's why delta V is thrown around as a concept so often. More so, how quickly can you change your velocity? And that's very, very important in space, especially because space is so big. If you want to get from here to the moon to Mars to the belt to the outer planets or Io or something like that, it's going to take a long time unless you are accelerating quite a bit. That's why they had to invent things like the Epstein drive on the Expanse. So you're right. Acceleration is the limiting factor here. You can go very, very fast in space if you do it safely. What's next?
From Bob IGDDF. How dense would an object creature mass have to be to survive at nuke point blank?
How dense would a creature have to be to survive a point blank nuclear device? I have no idea. Look. Even if an object, let's say, even if a creature was sturdy enough to withstand the kind of instantaneous fireball that we are talking about from a nuclear explosion, that creature still probably has eyes and lungs, in our example, and the extreme heat and the shock wave and the radiation from the nuclear bomb itself would probably absolutely obliterate that creature. Just the flash of heat from a nuclear bomb, if you were point blank, would vaporize immediately all of the skin on this nearly indestructible creature. The pressure wave that would be created, the overpressure from the bomb that would go into this thing's lungs and ears and nose, it would make you sound quite different, but it would blow it out. It would pop it. So even if your body was indestructible, there still the finer parts of your sensory apparatus would be severely affected. So you'd have to be talking about something that is not just dense, but like literally indestructible, biologically speaking. I don't think we know of any biological structure that could take a nuke face first. It'd be a tall order, but maybe I'm missing something. Maybe there's a snail somewhere. Probably not. What's next?
From Michael, I'm not going to try your last name.
Oh, all right.
Why Wi-Fi and not other frequencies in a wireless spectrum?
So in my episode about you don't want X-ray vision, which a lot of people, apparently I'm one of the only people in the comments who think that X-ray vision had something to do with X-rays. Wow, I guess a lot of people just took it like Kleenex. Like, oh, it's just a placeholder term for all the things that do that thing. I'll answer that in footnotes, but come on, it's the common assumption, I think, if you would ask people, is that it has to do with X-rays, right? What does X-ray vision have to do? I don't know. Anyway, so as an alternative to that, I said that you could use Wi-Fi vision. And because Wi-Fi is everywhere and because it's non-ionizing, it would be very good in letting you get an analog for X-ray vision. It would go through moderately thick surfaces, like thinner walls and stuff, and it would bounce off other structures, and you could image that, and then you could see through walls. Researchers are doing that right now. Why did I choose Wi-Fi vision as opposed to something else? Well, like I was saying with gamma radiation earlier, that is strong enough to absolutely obliterate biological structures, so that seems very dangerous, and you wouldn't want it near you. Radio waves, as I said, are ginormous, and so your eyes, or whatever structure you're using, would have to change radically. If you use Wi-Fi, it is everywhere already, so you don't have the you have to be your own detector problem and travel faster than the speed of light. And it's, the bands of Wi-Fi are in the range where it's not too wide, wavelength-wise, and so it could start interacting with biological structures. An even better version of Wi-Fi vision might indeed be microwave vision, or closer to microwave vision, because the wavelengths get even smaller and they can be penetrating, and that's why some airports around the world use millimeter wave scanners. It's closer to microwave. So microwave vision would be pretty good, but it's not as everywhere as Wi-Fi. I think to really harness a spectrum of light that's other than visible light, you would want radiation that is already everywhere, so that you don't have to shoot it out of your eyes and reflect it off of everything. So that's why I chose Wi-Fi vision. It's kind of in that middle ground of it's everywhere and it's not gonna, give people cancer and stuff, so that's why. One more question?
Last one.
From
Christian I. Could we in the future engineer our pets? Example, could I get one of my tarantulas made so it had wings?
You sound like a villain. But we can genetically engineer our pets now. Researchers in Japan made glow-in-the-dark kittens. Look it up. I think it was jellyfish DNA that they spliced into kittens, and it made them glow in the dark. A lot of the stopping points with genetic engineering have to do with ethics. There's a lot of really interesting, weird stuff. Not tarantulas with wings, I don't think. But there's a lot of interesting stuff we could do with biology if it was ethical. Splicing new DNA into humans, I mean, just think of how many people have a problem with just GMOs. I mean, we've eaten literally trillions of meals with GMOs and we haven't seen any adverse effects over time, but it's still a boogeyman. Imagine how bad it would be if it was GMH, genetically modified humans. Don't know if we can do that. That's not ethical. So there are cool things we could probably do. You could make a human glow in the dark if you wanted. I'm guessing. If it works for kittens, you can make it work for people. But yeah, because the same ethical restrictions aren't put on, things that we consider lesser conscious creatures, say a cat. You can differ on what you think about that, but so researchers can experiment on animals instead of humans and do different things. So you can clone your dog, you can make your cat glow in the dark, you can make goats produce spider silk. We can do a lot of that stuff right now. Just Google it. And that's all the time we have for this edition of Because Science Live. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much to all of you who have been watching the most recent episodes. We're doing pretty good. On a good track record for launching this year, and thank you so much. This is really important to me. Also, if you want new Because Science merch, we now have it. We have new mugs with the new logo. We have new mouse pads with the new logo. We also have those Smart Boy and Smart Bay t-shirts from San Diego Comic-Con that you've been asking me about. Go get one. If you use the offer code at shop.nerdist.com of SMART10, you can get 10% off until September 4th, which is awesome. Also, again, if you are in the Atlanta area for Dragon Con tomorrow afternoon, I will be moderating the Expansive Science panel. I've done it a couple of times now, even at the one where they got saved by Jeff Bezos, and people seem to like it. So come by if you're there. It's going to be a lot of fun, hopefully, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your weekend. Be nice to each other, especially in the comments where you can't see each other, because this is all we got.